Hello everyone, and welcome to round 2 of the 1959, just kidding, 2018 candidates tournament with a game from Alexander Grischuk versus Wesley So. Now both Grischuk and Wesley lost their yesterday's game. Wesley lost to Fabiano Caruana and Grischuk lost to Vladimir Kramnik, so both of them are definitely eager to gain at least half a point, if not a full point. So let's see this game. Grischuk opens it with e4, we have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. So the Ruy Lopez. We have a6, Morphy's defense, bishop to a4, knight to f6, and castles. Bishop to e7, d3, b5, bishop to b3, and now d6. c3, Wesley castles, and here we have h3. And Wesley goes for bishop to b7. Another idea is to go knight to a5, and after white retreats with the bishop, then push c5, and then you'll see what to do with the light square bishop. But Wesley goes for the immediate bishop to b7. So knight b to d2, we have rook to e8, and now knight to g5. And there's really no good way to defend this f7 pawn, so Wesley simply has to retreat rook to f8, which he does. If you tried something like d5 to try and defend f7 actively, this simply doesn't work, with the idea that if e captures knight to a5, first maybe you want to grab the bishop first and then grab the pawn back, but it doesn't work due to d6. And now your bishop on e7 is attacked, the f7 pawn is attacked, and after all of the exchanges, knight captures, queen captures, bishop captures, you simply lose a pawn here. Even bishop to d5 attacking white's queen simply captures, and after any move, white will be up a pawn and with a better position. So after this knight to g5, Wesley doesn't really have a choice here, rook back to f8. Rook to e1, we have d5, e captures, knight captures, and knight d to f3 now. Queen to d7, and now d4. E captures on d4, c captures on d4, and h6. Knight back to e4, and now rook f to e8. Bishop to d2, knight to f6, and now rook to c1. Knight captures on e4, rook captures on e4, and bishop to f6. And here Grischuk isn't interested in exchanging rooks, as Wesley, a couple of his previous moves were directed towards exchanging pieces, but Grischuk goes for rook to g4. Now there's the obvious threat of bishop captures on h6, and there really isn't a good way to deal with this. In the game, Wesley played rook to king to h8 to simply get out of the pin. But even an active defense, maybe rook 8 to d8, simply allowing bishop to h6 doesn't really work. As bishop captures, and after knight captures on d4, knight captures, bishop captures, and now queen to d2 with a very nice tactic. Now after rook to e4, white has this option of going rook captures on g7. Bishop captures and queen to g5, simply threatening checkmate. Only way to defend is queen to d4. But now simply bishop captures, and black cannot capture back. If he captures back, of course, queen captures rook wins the game for white. With the idea that you can't really move the king, bishop to c2 pins the rook, and if you defend with queen to f8, then queen g5 check, queen blocks, and now bishop captures on f7. Again, you can't capture with the queen, you can't capture with the king because of rook captures on c7, and if after king moves, simply queen check, queen h7, and now queen captures, and rook captures on c7. White is up 3 pawns, it's completely winning position. So after this rook to g4, Wesley decided to go rook to h8, but now rook to c5 by Grischuk. Rook 8 to d8, and now comes the move Wesley probably missed, but you know, it's chess, things happen. Queen to c1. And now you see the terrible threat of bishop capturing on h6 now, and also this knight really can't move because now the queen and rook are both attacking the c7 pawn. So if you combine both of this, I mean, of course, you can't capture on d4 with the bishop or something like that. Bishop captures on h6 is simply winning. Captures, this is checkmate. And even if you don't capture, if you push g6, bishop to f8, again, winning. Queen to h6 is coming. If you capture it, again, queen to h6, king moves, queen captures on g6. The f7 pawn is pinned due to the bishop on b3. Black has to move, and again, it's checkmate. So after this queen to c1, Wesley tried one last idea. It's the only move basically he has. He tried knight captures on d4, but now comes knight captures on d4, rook to e4, as you don't really have the option of recapturing. So rook to e4, and now rook captures on c7. Queen captures on d4. Now bishop to e3, first getting rid of the queen, and now you see the queen doesn't really have a good place to defend the bishop on b7. So first Wesley tried rook captures on g4, now with the idea that if Grischuk captures the queen, then maybe he would have some chances with rook captures on g2, but even this wouldn't work for black. But Grischuk isn't interested. He simply captures the rook on g4, and now the queen doesn't have a good square to defend the bishop on b7. Wesley tried queen to e4, but now simply f3, and now the queen definitely has to move out of the protection of the bishop. Queen to b4 was played, preparing one last trick after Grischuk captures the bishop. So rook captures, and now bishop captures on b2. Trying to give up the dark square bishop as well, as now if queen captures, then queen to e1 check. This will be a perpetual, as king has to move h2, g1, queen e1 check, king h2, queen to h4 check. But of course Grischuk isn't interested in this. He plays queen to f1, and now he's simply a piece up, with Wesley only having one pawn as a compensation. But okay, he tried a couple more moves. f6, queen to f2, now bishop to e5, f4, bishop moves g5, queen to e4, and here queen to f3, offering an exchange of queens and protecting the rook on b7. But even the g captures on h6 was also winning. But there's no need to go into this, as you're up a piece, you don't need any more complications. Simply queen to f3. Wesley, of course, avoided it with check, queen f2, queen back to e4, queen back to f3, as they are reaching move 40, so you want to reach that time control. Although, okay, this is move 36, queen b1 check, now king f2, bishop b4, queen to e2, queen to e4, and now queen to f3 and queen back to b1, and king to g3. This is move 40 now for Grischuk, and now he has all the time in the world, so now he will make some moves that will allow him to finish the game. F captures on g4, Wesley's 40th move. King to h2, we have queen to f5, rook to f7, simply attacking the queen, queen moves, and now we have f captures on g5. Bishop to d6 check, king to h3, and after this king to h3 move, Wesley so resigned the game, as he's still a piece down and there are no more tricks in the position. After h captures on g5, simply king to g4, and the king is actually very safe on g4. Black doesn't have a check that could even start a trick of some sort, and white has plenty of ways to win this. Either queen to h3, this will force an exchange of queens, as the black king can never go to g8. This bishop on b3 will produce a lot of discoveries, or if he wants, he can even maybe checkmate the black king with bishop d5, bishop to e4. But yeah, after this king to h3 move, Wesley so resigned the game, and this round 2 matchup goes to Alexander Grischuk. So yeah, that's a pretty bad start for Wesley. So starting the candidates with 0 out of 2, but it's a long tournament, so I mean, a couple of wins, and he's definitely back in the game. And I mean, it wasn't so long ago since Wesley had that unbeaten streak. I believe it's 59 or maybe 60 games that he went undefeated until he lost that first one to Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. But yeah, lately it's just not Wesley's day, like whenever he plays, or I don't know, it just seems that way. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I did already ask this question on a couple of my social media networks. Who do you have for your pick on winning the candidates? And aside from that, who do you think will win? Who would produce the most interesting match against Magnus Carlsen? As you know, I kind of thought Karakin has a pretty good chance of winning the candidates, but I definitely don't want to watch another Carlsen versus Karakin match. So yeah, and I don't know how many of you are on Twitter, but there's a very interesting discussion going on Twitter. It's basically a flame war between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri, but it's very interesting. A lot of people are following it, so maybe you want to check it out. So yeah, that's it. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.